Hello, kittens and heroes. I'm hoping this is going to be my Halloween special. So, this is a one-shot. A Ghost in Human Skin by AustinTheRustySpoon on AO3, read by Lily6645. This fic includes major character death and slight gore. That is your warning. Hope you enjoy. Summary. After Izuku is unexpectedly ambushed and shot in an alleyway, he wakes up as a ghost. Obviously, the next step is to possess his corpse and act like it never happened. The bullet pierced the skin of his chest before he could even realize what was happening. He looked down as blood splattered and dripped from the wound like a waterfall right where his heart should be. It felt like everything had slowed, as if it was allowing him more time to realize what had happened before his life ended for good. It wasn't supposed to end like this, but then again, that's probably what everyone thinks when their life starts to fade. It was a small-time villain he had been chasing, just a simple bank robber, though now he knew that wasn't the truth. He had chased him into a dead-end alley and celebrated too soon, not noticing the sniper up on the rooftop until it was too late, and now pain blossomed in his chest like a thorn-covered rose as he tried desperately to keep the blood from escaping his body. He could hear the robber laughing, but it didn't sound right. The sound echoed and bounced around him, both so far away and way too close. He could vaguely tell the robber was speaking, but his mind couldn't process the words. Izuku collapsed to the ground, wheezing desperately for the ability to keep breathing. The blood pooled around him, and soon he found that he could no longer move his limbs. He turned his gaze to the sky as a figure stood over him. Who was that? He hoped it wasn't one of his friends. He was a broken doll, shattered on the pavement, waiting for someone to find him and throw his scattered pieces away. It seemed like someone had come to pick up his pieces because he finally took his last breath, and blankness consumed his entirety. It wrapped itself around him like a warm, comforting blanket and took him away from the life he once knew. Only then, something happened. The blanket of darkness surrounding him was shredded to pieces, and he found himself being thrown back onto the ground where he had just lay dying. But something was different. He felt no pain, no aches, not even the fatal bullet wound that had brought him down. He looked down at his hands. They were transparent. Wait, Izuku thought to himself in shock. Am I a ghost? No. This couldn't be real. He looked around desperately and spotted it within moments. The alley was empty now. No robber or sniper, just the corpse of his once living body. He cringed as he looked at himself down on the ground. That's a lot of blood. What exactly did ghosts do? It wasn't like he could continue to be a hero if he was dead. He sighed and sat down next to his own cold, lifeless body. All things considered, he thought he was taking the news pretty well. The news being that he's dead now. Was he just supposed to sit around and wait for his body to be discovered? Izuku shuddered at the idea. He didn't want to see how people would react to seeing him dead. Maybe it wasn't the best idea to wait around until someone showed up. They must be getting worried, though. He didn't know how long he had been missing. But the sun was starting to set. Why did he think going after the robber was a good idea in the first place? Oh, yeah, his stupidly strong need to always help and do the right thing. Look where that got him. Dead. Soon, his body would be 6 feet under. Maybe he could learn how to process things like ghosts do in the movies. That way, he could watch over people and protect them even in the afterlife. Was this the afterlife? He didn't know. It didn't feel much different from the living life. He should start practicing now. The sooner he learned how to process things, the sooner he could go back to saving people. He was fine living an invisible life as long as he could still do what he loved. Mumbling to himself, Izuku looked around the alley for something he could try to possess. This is going to be difficult, he thought determinedly. But I can do it. Soon he spotted an empty, rotten box not too far from his body. Perfect. He got up and glided over to it, his brain only slightly registering that, holy shit, I'm not walking, I'm floating. He looked down at it. It was pretty small for a box, but big enough to carry a few books. The water damage and mold was clearly visible, and he almost wanted to try and find something else to practice on, only to remember, oh yeah, I can't get sick if I'm dead. He laughed a little at that. Maybe he was still in shock? He reached out and, surprisingly, felt a little tug, like an invisible source pulling him towards the box. He paused. It wasn't that easy, was it? Turns out it was. He stopped resisting the tug and felt the energy of his being flow into the box. It was a weird sensation. He felt lightheaded and almost as if he was collapsing into dust. Lights swirled around him and everything blurred before suddenly coming into focus again. Izuku suddenly felt this strong urge to cackle maniacally when he realized what he just did. I'm in a box! His brain yelled in disbelief. But he was a box now. What the hell? He tried to move, but quickly realized the only thing he could do was swing the little flaps on the box that people used to close it. Maybe he should have possessed something else because he felt absolutely disgusting. He could feel the mold, the dirt, and the slimy grease that coated him like a second skin. It felt like he hadn't showered in years. How long had this box been here? He had no idea how he could see while being a box. It's not like boxes had eyes. In the end, he decided not to question it too much. That was a thought for another day. Now it's time to learn how to unpossess something. Surprisingly, that was the difficult part. He pushed at the individual walls surrounding him to no avail. Izuku soon felt the panic rising because he didn't want to be stuck as a box for the rest of his sad ghost existence. He shoved and clawed at the walls, enclosing him in his little prison. In his panic, he felt something activate, something familiar. Next thing he knew, he was being flung from the box. It would have hurt when he hit the ground had he been able to feel pain. He simply got up and looked down at his hand and the glowing lightning flickering around it. Soon, the lightning faded as he stared dumbfounded. Apparently, a quirk was something that stuck with someone through life and death. The more he learned, the more curious he got about the circumstances. Izuku was surprised to note that no one had found his body yet. Were they even looking? Doubt began to swirl through his brain as negative thoughts started to come up from the depths of his mind. He hadn't seen any signs that people were looking for him. His mother wasn't even home. Hadn't he been gone for hours now? Maybe they had been waiting for him to go missing this entire time, and excuse to get rid of him. Even with a quirk, he still found himself useless at times. No one wanted to keep a useless Deku around. Why would they? He didn't blame them, but the thought still hurt. He knew in the back of his brain that they did care about him and were probably looking for him. At this very moment, he wandered back over to his corpse and sat down next to it, looking around for more things to possess. Nothing he saw looked very interesting. A dumpster, some more boxes, and some empty bottles. He leaned back on his hands and froze when he felt a tug, the same kind of tug he had just felt a few moments ago. His emerald green eyes widened in disbelief as he looked down at his very own corpse, where the tug was coming from. That couldn't be possible, could it? At this point, anything could be possible. He was a ghost with a quirk, for fuck's sake! He glanced around at his surroundings once more. Izuku didn't know what he was expecting to find, but it felt like he was about to do something wrong, as if doing this would be breaking some unspoken rule. He didn't care though. He had just died, and now there was a way for him to go back. He sure as hell wasn't going to ignore this opportunity. He reached out to the tugging sensation and fell. Izuku ignored the stares as he walked through the rundown gas station towards the bathroom. He knew he was covered in blood and probably looked like he was the Walking Dead. Ha! If only they knew. He walked into the dirty bathroom and wasted no time locking the door and striding towards the mirror. He looked awful. He already knew that because he clearly saw his corpse earlier before possessing it. But now looking in the mirror, he could see how truly awful he looked. He looked dead. Dry blood coating his skin and clothes, and the hole in his chest was still clearly visible. He was surprised no one had called the police yet. Or maybe they had. He quickly started washing the blood off of his hands and face using the bathroom sink. Obviously, he would still need to shower. However, any little thing would help right now. His eyes looked dull, not entirely lifeless, but there was a visible difference. he hoped no one questioned it. People stared the entire walk home. He didn't know how long ago the sun had set, but the streets still had enough people for the eyes on him to be noticeable. He wanted to head over to UA as soon as possible, but he knew that if he showed up covered in blood with a bullet wound going through his heart, that would lead to some unwanted questions. He didn't know if ghosts were allowed to be heroes or not, so maybe it was better to keep it to himself. He sighed in relief when his house came into view. He knew his mom wasn't home. She worked a late shift that night. The hospital was constantly busy. Still, he climbed into the house through one of the windows, just in case. The soft sound of his footfalls were the only thing he could hear, bringing him to the realization that not only was his heart not beating, but he hadn't been breathing at all this entire time. That could be a problem. It seemed his body no longer needed oxygen, which means he'd have to constantly make sure he was breathing. He sucked in a breath and let it out, just to make sure he still could before continuing on. It felt like nothing. Going to his room, he grabbed a clean green hoodie and some gray sweatpants before going to the bathroom to take off his current blood-encrusted clothing. Izuku climbed into the shower and relaxed under the water raining down on him. He watched as the water pooling around his feet turned a pinkish red color as the blood washed from his skin. He looked down in wonder at the hole in his chest. It wasn't bleeding anymore, and now that it was clean, he could basically look into it. He poked it curiously. He was glad he couldn't feel pain anymore because he could imagine this would sting a lot. Now that he thought about it, could corpses heal? Sure, he was in control of his body, but that didn't mean it was alive again. He quickly got out of the shower and got dressed. Racing down the stairs where he knew his mom kept the first aid kit, he pulled out a needle and surgical thread, taking one last look at the open hole before stitching it up. They're probably worried about me. Izuku walked up the stairs and rummaged through the pockets of his bloody clothes, looking for his phone only to not find it. He must have dropped it at some point and not noticed. He had a lot on his mind at the moment, so he didn't find that all too surprising. Looks like he'll have to pay UA a surprise visit. Though, is it really a surprise visit if he lives there? He counts it as one since he's been missing for a bit now. They'll be surprised to see him. He wasn't looking forward to the walk to UA, but it had to be done. There was worse things like, being dead. Izuku grimaced as he started his journey, thinking of all the puns he could make with this. Even if he's the only one who would get it, it's still funny. Now that he's freshly showered and not covered in blood, no one bothered to pay attention to him. He liked it that way. He wasn't a very big fan of attention, though it could be nice every once in a while. The trees around him swayed as a breeze swept over them. Izuku noticed with mute melancholy that he couldn't really feel it. He tried to smell the air only for nothing to happen. Now that he thought about it, he couldn't taste either. Most of his senses seemed to be non existent or a lot duller than they used to be. Is this how he really wanted to live? Yue was in his sight now. He found himself looking up at the big building towering before him. This body would only last him so long before it started rotting. If he could cry, the tears would be streaming down his face. He wasn't ready to leave anything behind. His friends, his mom, his dreams, all gone in an instant. A click, a bang, and everything was ruined. He didn't have a decision to make. It was made for him. Izuku had no choice in the matter. There was a bright side to it, though. They wouldn't find him bleeding out alone in some dirty alleyway. He hated the thought of causing his friends and mom such pain and sorrow, but they would catch on quickly, and as selfish as it might be, Izuku didn't want to be there when they realized. So Izuku sat himself down, leaning against the gate. There was no easy way to do this, but he figured outside UA would be the best place to sit himself. So he sat, with clean clothes and clean skin. The teachers always got there before the students, so none of his classmates would have to see him. He just hoped it wasn't Aizawa or All Might that found him. He had caused those two enough pain as it is. He let himself slip out of his body. The disorientating feeling was something he probably wouldn't get used to anytime soon, but he would eventually, because while he couldn't stay in his dead body, that wouldn't stop him from doing whatever he could to continue to follow his dream. He knew his friends would go on to be amazing heroes. They'd get through this and keep striving forward, and Izuku would always be watching over them. With that, he was gone, leaving everything once and for all to start a new journey. That was A Ghost in Human Skin by AustinTheRustySpoon on AO3. If you like this, please go support the original author. Link in the description below. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you have a great Halloween. Bye, kittens and heroes.